Reason is like the spokesperson for a government where real power lies in the hands of emotions. People don't think to find the truth, they think to justify what they already believe to be true. This is one of Tara Tasman's central findings. Why are good people divided by politics and religion? The book doesn't try to teach people to be more moral, but traces the deep roots of what we perceive as purely rational morality, which actually stems from emotional reflexes evolved over millions of years. Jonathan 2 with the voice of a psychological scientist, combined with the subtlety of a philosopher, has flung open the door to a realm where reason is merely the tail of the intuitive dog. Where fierce conflicts between right and wrong are, in fact, clashes between different emotional structures. The book divides human beings into two-tiered creatures. The lower tier is social instinct, the upper tier is the language of reason. At a deeper level, morality is not a product of deduction, but an evolutionary tool that helps humans cooperate, bond, and survive. 2 argues that morality itself created cultures, religions, and ideologies, but simultaneously, it is what divides humanity. Morality both binds people together and blinds them to the values of others. The question posed by the book resonates like an unsettling paradox. If morality was born to help people coexist, why does it make us confront each other so much? If everyone believes they are good, why is the world still filled with hatred, prejudice, and division? And is there any way to dialogue when our very moral instincts prevent us from listening? Tara Tasman is not just a psychological work, but a mirror reflecting deeply into the social soul of humanity. Reading it feels like standing before a truth that is both bewildering and liberating. That goodness, reason, and even our extremism all stem from the same place. The book doesn't promise peace, but gives us something more important. A different pair of eyes to look at ourselves and others, not with judgment but with understanding. Human beings have always believed themselves to be rational creatures. Since ancient times, we've convinced ourselves that all our actions originate from thought. But when we look deeper into how we make moral judgments, the truth emerges with an astonishing paradox. We don't reason to find what's right or wrong, but to justify what we already feel is right. I once believed the opposite, like many philosophers and psychologists before. I thought morality sprang from reason, that we learn to be good through thought and education. But the deeper I delved into research, the more I listened to people's impulsive reactions to good and evil, the more I realized something else was at work: intuition. It arrives first, as fast as lightning. Our decisions are formed even before consciousness can rationalize them. When you ask a child why stealing is wrong, they'll struggle to explain, but the feeling of wrongness is immediate. Just like adults, we feel disgusted when we hear about incest or betrayal, even if we sometimes can't articulate why. Morality doesn't originate from logic, but from deep emotional responses etched into evolution since Plato to Kant. The world once saw reason as the guiding light for morality, but David Hume said something that made many uncomfortable. Reason is, and ought only to be, the slave of the passions. When I read that, I felt he touched upon a truth that modern science is only now gradually proving. Emotions are the source of all moral judgments. Reason only comes later to arrange, legitimize, and protect decisions already set by emotion. In psychological experiments, I observed this repeatedly when placing people in morally ambiguous situations. For example, an adult brother and sister engage in consensual sex but keep it a secret. Most participants immediately react with a feeling of disgust. When asked why, they start looking for reasons, but the more they explain, the more stuck they become. One person might say it could cause harm, but when I remove the element of harm, they still insist it's wrong. Eventually, they just blurt out, "I don't know why, but it's wrong." That's the moment when reason collapses before the power of intuition. Moral intuition comes first, reason comes later. Our brain is designed not to seek absolute truth, but to react quickly to social cues that were once linked to human survival. When our ancestors lived in small tribes, the ability to recognize a traitor, a dangerous person, or a trustworthy one became a vital survival tool. Morality, therefore, is not a product of philosophy, but a sophisticated evolutionary mechanism for humans to survive in groups. The modern world makes us think we are independent thinkers, but deep down, every decision we make is still governed by ancient moral censors. We don't need a reason to help someone who falls on the street, nor do we need a theory to feel pain when others are hurt. All these reactions come from the same source: an evolutionary instinct to cooperate and avoid conflict within the community. If we were born into a different culture, our sense of right might be entirely different. An action considered a sin in one place might be praised in another. This proves that morality is not absolutely universal. It's the result of the interplay between genetics and culture, between instinct and learning. Morality is not just a set of rules, but an emotional language that each society creates to maintain order. On this journey, we discover a paradox. The more we try to define morality with reason, the further we stray from its true nature. Morality cannot be forced into a formula. It is vivid, flexible, and often illogical. A person might cry from compassion or rage from injustice, but cannot explain why those emotions arise. Because morality is something we feel asterisk, not something we think asterisk. I gradually understood that to comprehend humanity, we must begin with emotions. We are reasoning creatures, but we are driven by feelings. Endless debates about politics or religion don't stem from differences in reason, but from the clash of deep moral intuitions. Each side believes they are right because the elephant within them has already chosen a direction. If morality doesn't come from reason, if our beliefs are merely products of intuition, then what truly controls us? Is it that within each person, there exists a tiny rider, representing reason, attempting to control a colossal elephant, representing intuition, yet only able to steer it with flimsy tugs of the reins? If we view the human mind as a decision-making machine, most of its gears operate silently. Emotion is the engine, and reason is merely the narrator for what has already been decided. I call this the phenomenon of the intuitive dog and the rational tail. Intuition makes the judgment, and reason only comes later to justify it. Imagine a dog after it has barked; its tail simply wags along. Human reason is similar. When we feel something is right or wrong, we react almost instantly. Only then do we mobilize logic to explain that feeling, much like the tail trying to wag in the direction the dog has already chosen. Many people believe they think independently. But in reality, most of the time, we are merely constructing plausible stories to protect our initial feelings. In my experiments, this phenomenon repeated endlessly when confronted with moral dilemmas. People made judgments in a matter of seconds too quickly to be called thought. I saw students flinch, frown, or smile at a situation before they could even articulate any reasoning. Emotion is the driver. Reason is merely the spokesperson. Many still believe that reason can control emotion, like a rider controlling an animal. But if we observe more closely, we'll realize that animal is not small, but a colossal elephant, and the rider, however intelligent, is merely perched on its back, holding flimsy reins. Intuition is the elephant, and reason is the rider. The elephant can change direction simply due to a sound, a memory, an image that evokes emotion. The rider can only pretend that they chose that path. When the elephant stops, reason will conjure up a myriad of justifications. When the elephant turns, reason will immediately construct another story to rationalize it. We live in the illusion that we are in control. But most of the time, we are just narrating decisions that emotions have already set. Think back to the times you argued with others. The more our arguments were reinforced, the more entrenched our initial beliefs became. None of us truly change our minds merely by being persuaded. Usually, what makes us change is an emotional moment, an experience, a glance, a sudden empathy. That's when the elephant wavers and the rider merely reinterprets the new direction. In society, this phenomenon creates invisible walls. When people discuss politics or religion, they think they are using reason, but in fact, each person has an elephant pulling in a different direction. Their reason is merely serving as a lawyer, finding evidence, citing sources, and refuting, not to seek truth, but to win. We think like lawyers, not like scientists. In another study, I had participants read moral stories and asked them to make judgments, then explain them. No matter how the story's content changed, the results were always the same. Emotion came first, reasoning followed. And when I demonstrated that their arguments were inconsistent, many still held onto their initial feelings. This shows that instead of seeking truth, our brains are programmed to protect our intuitions. But the strange thing is that humans are not entirely confined within their elephants. The rider can learn to converse with it. We cannot command, but we can persuade. We cannot force, but we can guide through experience, through imagery, through emotion. When we truly listen to others, when we make them feel understood, their elephant can shift, and only then does reason begin to open up. This is why, in communication or politics, stories are always more powerful than arguments. A moving speech can change the attitudes of thousands, whereas statistics rarely achieve that. Emotion guides perception. We believe what feels right, and then we seek reasons to reinforce that belief. If we understand this rule, we will be less harsh with each other. We will know that in every argument, it's not our reason clashing, but two elephants confronting each other. If you want to persuade someone, don't pull the reins with logic. Gently touch their elephant. When I realized this, the world seemed to open up with a different depth. From then on, I no longer saw morality as a rigid set of rules, but as a flow of emotions arranged into words by reason. Morality is not a product of reasoning, but a story that emotion tells in the language of reason. And if this is true, then our real task is not to argue to win, but to learn to understand the elephants passing each other in the dark. Each one believes it's on the right path. Each person feels they are reasonable. Only when we see this mechanism can we step out of the loop of justification and begin to touch understanding. In the human world, each of us is campaigning for ourselves. We want to be seen as good, right, reasonable. The human brain is not programmed to seek truth, but to win in the social game. That's why we not only justify our actions, but also skillfully embellish them to gain others' agreement. Imagine a candidate campaigning. He doesn't care much about absolute truth, he just wants to make a good impression on voters. Humans are the same. When presenting a moral argument, we rarely ask, "Is this true?" but often implicitly ask in our minds, "Will this make me look more righteous?" Therefore, reason acts as an orator, not an impartial judge. It selects words, arranges reasons, and ignores unfavorable details, all to reinforce the image we want to protect. But this mechanism is not a flaw. It's the result of millions of years of evolution in small, primitive communities. Survival depended on the ability to cooperate and be trusted. Those who could persuade others, build alliances, and create a sense of righteousness would be supported by the group. The brain evolved not to find truth, but to persuade and maintain connections. I once thought morality was the path to reason, but now I understand morality is the network connecting people to each other. Every argument we make, every story we tell, is aimed at strengthening that bond. Even when we think we are thinking independently, most of what we believe reflects the values of the group we belong to. Humans are social creatures before they are rational creatures. When observing political debates, I realized this more clearly than ever. Each side believes they possess the truth, but in reality, they are merely defending their tribal morality, that which makes them feel loyal, bonded, and recognized. When we read an article that aligns with our beliefs, we feel elated as if we've won. When we encounter opposing views, we react as if threatened. These emotions are not products of reason but evolutionary reflexes, remnants from a time when we had to defend our tribe by instinct. That doesn't mean humans cannot think objectively, but to do so, we need to rise above our defensive instincts. When we argue solely to prove ourselves right, the elephant within us will resist all opposing logic. But when we are truly curious, when we want to understand instead of win, that elephant will stop, look around, and sometimes change direction. Understanding doesn't come from reasoning, but from making others feel safe enough to listen. I recall a study where people were asked to state reasons why they supported a particular policy. Most were confident they understood their viewpoint, but when asked to explain in detail the consequences, costs, or implementation mechanisms, they began to realize how shallow their understanding was. It was in that moment that a door opened. They became less extreme, more willing to listen. When reason is forced to confront its own limits, it becomes more humble. The key to understanding is not winning an argument, but recognizing that we don't know as much as we think. Intellectual humility is the foundation for building bridges between beliefs. Because if morality comes from intuition, then the path to others must go through emotion, through compassion, curiosity, and non-defensive listening. From an evolutionary perspective, this is how humanity has survived. We evolved not just to compete, but also to cooperate. Our brains have two parallel tasks: self-protection and group maintenance. Therefore, reason carries two tendencies, one inward, seeking to justify itself, one outward, seeking to connect with others. When reason turns inward, it becomes a tool of the ego. When it turns outward, it becomes a bridge for the community. If we understand this, we will see a complete picture of morality. It is both beautiful and dangerous. It makes us love, protect, and sacrifice, but also blinds us, divides us, and makes us hate. Morality is what binds people together, yet also blinds them. And only when we recognize the limits of reason do we begin to understand why the world is full of good people yet so deeply divided. Each person is campaigning in their own moral world. Each person has a speech in their head. Vote for me because I am good. I represent what is right. And in that campaign, everyone believes they are the candidate of truth. But perhaps what humanity truly needs is not a triumphant speech, but the moment when the elephant within us knows to stop, look toward the elephant of another, and gently nod. Humans have always believed that morality is simple: do no harm and be fair. These two principles seem sufficient to construct the entire moral world, but reality is more complex. Human morality is built not just on harm and fairness, but on a multi-layered, multi-flavored structure, where each culture chooses its own distinct tastes of good and evil. I realized this when observing the differences between so-called modern societies and the rest of the world. In wealthy, industrialized, democratic places, where people are educated in rational and individualistic thought, morality is often understood as a contract. Don't infringe on my rights, and I won't infringe on yours. In such a world, morality is an issue between individuals, not between individuals and the community. But when I set foot in Indian villages or spoke with Brazilians, I realized a different order was at play. Morality there was not just about not causing harm, but also about living rightly, maintaining honor, respecting tradition, and preserving the purity of the soul. The Western world often considers itself the moral standard, but in reality, they are just a strange minority, a peculiar group in human history. I call them weird, an acronym for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Weird people tend to separate individuals from the community, believe in independent reason, and view emotions as secondary. They imagine that morality only needs two flavors, harm and fairness. But this very belief makes them blind to cultures where hierarchy, loyalty, or sacredness are equally important. An Indian person might find it immoral if someone disrespects their parents or breaks tradition, even if the action causes no material harm to anyone. An American might not understand why eating beef is considered sinful, whereas for Hindus, it's an offense to the sacred. The feeling of right or wrong doesn't always originate from suffering or fairness, but also from collective beliefs, from what the community deems respectable or fearful. We often think morality can be measured by reason. But human morality is like a piece of music with many movements, and the West only hears two melodies. When social science only studies weird people, they assume they understand humanity, but most of the world is not like them. People living in villages, where family is central, where authority is respected, where purity is seen as the spiritual core, these people live with a communal, symbiotic morality, where the individual dissolves into a network of duty, reverence, and loyalty. If viewed only through an individualistic lens, one might see these values as oppressive, but from another perspective, they are the cement that binds the community. A person respects their superior not out of fear, but from an understanding that order creates harmony. A person is loyal to their group not from a lack of freedom, but from knowing that solidarity keeps the group alive. Morality not only protects individuals, but also maintains the collective. I began to realize that Western morality is like a dish using only two types of seasoning. It's refined and clear, but one-dimensional. The morality of most of humanity is like a multi-flavored stew, complex, contradictory, but rich. And if you're only used to one flavor, you won't understand why others find the other dish delicious. Similarly, weird people find it hard to understand why others might prioritize loyalty over fairness or deem sacredness more important than freedom. For decades, moral psychologists used Americans as the standard. They concluded that morality is a matter of individual rights. But when observing children in many cultures, I saw differences. In India, a child would consider lying to parents a greater sin than petty theft. In America, that order is reversed. These differences are not accidental. They stem from innate moral templates that each culture develops in its own way. When we only use our standards to judge others, we easily assume they are backward or blind. But in reality, they are simply living by a moral system with a few extra taste receptors that we have lost. If we were born into their society, perhaps we too would feel offended when someone breaks a ritual or ashamed when we disrespect our elders. Morality is not a universal truth, but a set of evolutionary reflexes brewed by culture in its own unique way. The modern world makes us believe that morality must be based on reason, but in fact, it is the product of thousands of years of adaptation. Our ancestors survived not only through compassion, but also through loyalty, respect, and belief in the sacred. These emotions were once tools for survival, no less than compassion. When we re-examine this, morality appears not as a flat surface, but as a multi-layered sphere, where each layer reflects a different evolutionary function. If there's one thing I want to convey, it's to stop believing that morality only has two colors. In fact, it is a blend of countless shades. Each culture chooses its own mix, and no one has the right to declare their picture as the standard. To understand people, we must learn to see through the eyes of many moral systems simultaneously. When we realize this, we begin to experience humility in our understanding. Fierce debates about right and wrong, progressive or conservative, freedom or tradition, are all just manifestations of moral tongues tasting the world with different flavors. And perhaps only when we realize that everyone is experiencing their own unique flavor can we truly begin the dialogue called humanity. If morality isn't just about harm and fairness, then what are the other flavors? The answer came to me like an intuition. When observing how people react in different circumstances, one person might cry when seeing another hurt, but also rage when someone betrays their organization. They feel offended when someone disrespects their elders or disgusted when witnessing behavior considered impure. All these reactions are moral, even if reason often doesn't recognize them. The human mind is like a tongue with many different taste receptors, and each moral taste bud reacts to a specific type of signal. I began to describe morality in the language of biology. Moral foundations are innate evolutionary modules. They are programmed into the brain as emotional switches, and culture merely turns them on or off with specific circumstances. When looking at how societies form, we clearly see the traces of the first 5 moral tastes. The first taste is **care/harm**. It stems from parental love for offspring, from the instinct to protect the weak in the herd. When we see someone in pain, we feel that pain spread within ourselves. This emotion fosters compassion, gives rise to kindness, and is the root of values like protecting life, helping others, and opposing violence. The second taste is **fairness/cheating**. It originates from the evolutionary instinct for reciprocity. We reward the fair and punish the exploitative. The feeling of anger when deceived or the joy when justice is served both come from this taste. For modern people, fairness has become a symbol of morality, but in essence, it is just one of many receptors, a mechanism to ensure that cooperation is not broken. The third taste is **loyalty/betrayal**. This is the foundation that helps humans transcend individual instincts to form groups. It creates pride when seeing a flag wave, moves us when hearing a national anthem, or causes pain when betrayed by a comrade. At the evolutionary level, loyalty is the glue that keeps the group alive. At the cultural level, it transforms into patriotism, team spirit, loyalty to family or organization. The fourth taste is **authority/subversion**. It formed when humans lived in hierarchical groups. Respect for experienced individuals and adherence to discipline were once conditions for the group's survival. From this, humans developed a natural sense of order, rank, and duty. When someone insults an elder or breaks protocol, we feel uncomfortable, not because of material harm, but because the disruption of order causes societal imbalance. The fifth taste is **sanctity degradation**. It is the legacy of the disease avoidance instinct, helping our ancestors stay away from corpses, blood, and waste. But over time, this feeling of disgust expanded to the spiritual realm. What is considered dirty, sinful, or an offense to the sacred also makes us shudder. People fast, bathe, and abstain not just to cleanse the body, but to purify the soul. The taste of purity transforms morality into a journey towards the sublime. Later, I realized there was one more taste: liberty/oppression asterisk. Humans are born to hate being controlled, to love the feeling of autonomy. We react strongly to tyrants and empathize deeply with those who are oppressed. This foundation makes us stand with the weak and rebel against coercion. It is the energy that fuels the aspiration for democracy and human rights. When I put them all together, I saw a moral map with 6 directions. Each direction guides humans to react to a different type of situation. And from this, every culture, every ideology is merely a different recipe blending these 6 moral tastes. One society might heavily season with care, lightly with authority. A religion might emphasize purity, while a political movement might be rich in liberty. Like a chef choosing spices to create a dish, cultures choose how to activate or inhibit these moral tastes according to their survival needs. If a person is only accustomed to tasting 2 flavors, harm and fairness, they will find the moral dishes of others very strange. They won't understand why people bow before superiors or why others are willing to sacrifice for the collective. But when we realize that all these stem from innate receptors in the same human brain, we will understand that no one is more moral than another. They just use different flavors. The human moral world is therefore like a market full of aromas. The scent of compassion blends with the spicy taste of fairness, the salty taste of loyalty, the rich taste of authority, the pure taste of sanctity, and the strong taste of liberty. Each people chooses its own recipe, and when a group of people believes that only their recipe is correct, they will begin to view other dishes as wrong, corrupt, sinful. But if we look deeper, we will see that all are merely evolutionary reflexes colored by culture. Morality is the product of millions of years of living together, something that helps humans both love and contend, bond and divide. When we understand this structure, we no longer judge from a high perch but begin to listen. Because each person, no matter how different, is speaking in a moral language taught by evolution, the language of ancient taste buds that we all share. There are moments that make people completely unlike themselves. A disaster, a victory, a symbol lit up, and suddenly the individual self dissolves into the we. Humans are inherently gregarious because, deep down, we don't just live to exist alone, but to belong to a group, a collective, something larger than ourselves. I witnessed this when a city was plunged into grief, yet strangers extended their hands to help each other like family. In those moments, something magical happened. Selfishness vanished, competition quieted, and only a sense of connection remained. Humans seem programmed to react this way. We are born with individual instincts, but also endowed with the ability to merge into one. Morality itself is the thread that pulls us out of that primal solitude. Biologists debated for centuries, how can an organism sacrifice for its kind and still survive natural selection? The answer lies in group selection, where cooperative collectives triumph over purely competitive ones. Humans succeed not because we are stronger as individuals, but because we know how to bond into groups. Morality has evolved as a biological glue, helping separate individuals merge into a single entity with a common will. Look at chimpanzees, our closest relatives. They also cooperate, but their cooperation occurs only in small, conditional exchanges. We humans, however, can cooperate with millions of strangers, can trust people we've never met, can sacrifice for abstract symbols like nation or belief. Why? Because we carry within us the capacity of bees, a species that lives for the hive, willing to dedicate the self to the collective. But that doesn't mean we lose our individual part. Humans are hybrid creatures, 90% chimpanzee and 10% bee. Within us always exist 2 opposing forces. One pulls towards individual instinct, one pushes towards community cohesion. When the I rises, we want to stand out, gain advantage, compete. When the we awakens, we want to coexist, to blend into the collective, to do something greater than ourselves. And it is this oscillation between these 2 poles that makes up both the tragedy and the beauty of humanity throughout history. The times when humans were strongest were also when they were most communal. In crises, wars, or rituals, we see humans become incredibly synchronized. Crowds singing together, crying together, fighting together, sharing a common belief, all activated by ancient evolutionary mechanisms. Morality allows people to forget themselves to become part of the whole. I once wondered why a soldier would sacrifice their life for comrades, why a mother would endure suffering for her child, why strangers could rebuild a ruined city together. The answer isn't in reason, it's in our social heart, where morality isn't just a tool for judging behavior but the bloodstream connecting life between people. Human groupishness is not a remnant of animal instinct but the pinnacle of social evolution. It is what allowed us to build religions, nations, laws, art, and even love. Every time people unite for an ideal, bow before a sacred symbol, or collectively protect what they believe is right, that is when morality is operating at its deepest level, the level of community. Yet with that same power, morality also sows the seeds of conflict. When the bond becomes too tight, we begin to distinguish us from them. Each group views its values as absolute, and from this arise prejudice, war, and division. Morality unites us but also blinds us. It gives us a sense of sacredness when belonging to a group, but it also makes us forget that others feel sacred in their own beliefs. I don't deny the power of the I. Without it, we would dissolve into the collective, losing individual direction. But neither can we deny that if we only live for ourselves, society would collapse. Humans need both, the I for creativity and the we for survival. Between chimpanzee and bee, we must learn to balance. When we understand this, we look at the world with different eyes. Every symbol, every belief, every community that humans build is the result of the same mechanism, the desire to connect. When we judge a group of people for their devotion, we forget that within us too exists the seed of that devotion, just waiting to be activated. Morality is a double-edged sword. It saves humanity from loneliness, but it can also drown us in our own illusions. We are born to both love and contend. But perhaps only when we realize we are creatures of both worlds, individual and communal do, we understand why morality is both a connecting thread and a separating wall between people. There's a strange thing I've noticed after many years of observing people. In special moments, they completely transform. A dance, a collective song, a religious ritual, or even a parade can turn hundreds of people into a single entity. Synchronized glances, matching footsteps, voices blending together, that's when the hive switch within us is flipped. Humans are a species that can switch between two modes, individual mode and hive mode. In individual mode, we live for ourselves, compete, seek advantage. But when the hive switch is activated, we forget who we are. We become part of something larger, feeling exhilarated, euphoric, sometimes sacred. In that moment, the meaning of life is no longer in the self, but in the feeling of merging into the common flow of humanity. Neuroscientists call this phenomenon temporary self-dissolution. When we sing in a choir, run with teammates, or stand in a crowd with shared belief, our brains release chemicals that make the boundary between I and they disappear. We feel relieved, happy, as if liberated. This explains why people who have experienced collective rituals, from prayer services to soccer matches, all say they feel uplifted and belong. The hive switch is an evolutionary legacy that helps humans cooperate on a large scale. It transforms us from isolated individuals into parts of a greater whole, like cells in a body. It is thanks to this ability that we can build cities, establish nations, organize rituals, and sacrifice for ideals. It is the fire of patriotism, the strength of an army, the soul of faith. When I understood this mechanism, many things in human history suddenly became clear. The dancing rituals of tribes, pilgrimages lasting hundreds of miles, protest marches, religious ceremonies all are tools to awaken the hive switch. The synchronization of people in movement, sound, and breath makes them forget themselves, feel sacred, and willing to sacrifice for the collective. Morality and rituals were born together to control this switch. A classic example is marching armies. When thousands of people march in unison, they are not just training discipline, they are merging into a common will. Psychological studies show that people who move in rhythm with others are more likely to trust and cooperate. When we harmonize, we empathize. When we empathize, we are willing to sacrifice. Music, rhythm, symbols all are languages that the hive switch understands. I once attended a Buddhist ceremony in Nepal, where hundreds of people chanted a mantra together. No one spoke to anyone, but the entire space seemed to breathe in unison. I felt the spread of a collective energy, a sense of sacredness that no words could describe. In that moment, I understood why religion could exist for thousands of years. Because it knows how to awaken the deepest place in the human soul, the yearning to dissolve into something greater than oneself. But the hive switch doesn't just create good things. When activated incorrectly, it becomes a dangerous tool. Fanatical crowds, crusading armies, extremist groups are all fueled by the same energy, the energy of unification. Once dissolved into the collective, people easily forget the limits of individual morality. They believe that if they act for the sacred, then all means are permissible. The power that makes us noble is also the power that can blind us. Therefore, the important thing is not to extinguish this switch, but to learn how to use it in the right direction. When guided by compassion, the hive switch can create miracles, humanitarian movements, altruistic communities, peaceful revolutions. When guided by hatred, it can turn a crowd into a pack of predators. Between these two extremes lies only a thin line. Humans need moments of dissolving into the common, because that is when they feel they belong to the universe. But we also need awareness not to lose ourselves in that fervor. The I and the we must coexist like two halves of a soul. When both are balanced, humans not only live for themselves, but also for something greater, without falling into the darkness of extremism. That is the highest mission of morality, to help us find unity between the I and the we, between freedom and connection, between the wakefulness of reason and the joy of community. Because only when these two halves become one can humanity be both strong and benevolent, cooperative yet not blind. When observing people in their most sacred moments, I realized that morality is not just a principle, but a spiritual energy that helps people connect and uplift each other. It is this energy that has created the religions, rituals, and symbols that billions are willing to sacrifice to protect. In the modern world, many believe that religion is just a relic of the past, an outdated legacy that hinders reason. But if we look through the eyes of an evolutionist, we will see that religion is not useless at all. Religion is the oldest technology that helps humans overcome the limits of individual instinct. It teaches us that there are things more sacred than self-interest, that life has meaning only when we live for something greater than ourselves. Religion acts as a sanctified social network. It provides three fundamental benefits to the group: increased cohesion, reduced cheating, and promoted altruism. People who share beliefs, who worship a common symbol, tend to trust and help each other more. In religious communities, people readily donate, sacrifice, and maintain standards of conduct because they feel they are living in a sacred order that cannot be broken. From an evolutionary perspective, this is a great leap. Humans became strong not because religion helped them understand the world, but because religion created highly disciplined and cooperative teams. Groups with shared beliefs survived better, grew faster, and left more descendants. That's why, for thousands of years, communities with common rituals, beliefs, and myths always outlasted groups without spiritual cohesion. However, this same mechanism makes morality a double-edged sword. When something is considered sacred, it immediately falls outside the realm of reason. People can debate benefits or policies, but they cannot debate the sacred. The sacred both binds and blinds. It creates absolute loyalty, but also sparks war and division. When two groups worship different symbols, reason will be overwhelmed by the emotion of protecting their sacred belief. Modern politics, though not explicitly religious, operates by the same mechanism. Each faction has its own doctrines, symbols, and ritual slogans, flags, leaders, or values that are sanctified. People no longer debate to understand each other, but to protect their political faith. The more they believe they represent good, the more they see the opposition as the embodiment of evil. Morality, instead of expanding the heart, erects walls. I once believed that reason could heal the world, but now I understand. Reason cannot defeat emotion. It can only accompany it. To make people disagree constructively, we must touch deeper emotions of belonging and respect. When we make others feel heard, they can lower the defensive barriers of their moral tribe. The solution is not to eliminate differences, but to learn to accept that these differences are natural. Every person, every culture, every faction is simply relying on different moral foundations. One person considers fairness supreme, another reveres loyalty. This side respects liberty, that side preserves purity. No one is entirely right, because morality is a symphony with many movements, not a solo. If we understand that, we can step out of our closed circles. We can argue without hatred, disagree, yet still respect. Because ultimately, the purpose of morality is not to win an argument, but to help us coexist. Looking back at humanity's evolutionary journey, I see morality as both a gift and a burden. It elevates us from the animal world, but also binds us in countless illusions of good and evil. Morality makes us sing together, cry together, sacrifice for each other, but it also makes us burn each other's homes because we believe we are defending righteousness. Humans are two-tiered creatures, one tier of the individual, one tier of the collective. When these two tiers harmonize, we create art, religion, knowledge, and compassion. When they conflict, we create war and extremism. Understanding this mechanism is the first step to living more wisely, not by suppressing moral instinct, but by illuminating it. And perhaps the greatest lesson is that morality doesn't make us angels. It makes us human, both magnificent and contradictory, capable of infinite love, yet also blind to the point of cruelty. Understanding this, we no longer harbor illusions of perfection, but will know how to look at each other with deeper compassion. Because only then can morality truly fulfill its mission, connecting people in the light of understanding. Perhaps the most haunting realization after closing this book is that most conflicts in this world do not stem from evil, but from good, or rather, from many different ways of defining good. Everyone believes they are right because the elephant within them has already chosen its direction. But this fierce belief prevents us from hearing the voices of others. The deepest lesson here is that morality not only divides us, but is also the only thread that can reconnect us. When we understand that others are also acting according to their moral system, our hearts suddenly soften. No one is evil simply because they want to be. They are merely protecting what they consider sacred. And if we can see that sacredness in their eyes, even for a second, we will stop wanting to win and begin to want to understand. I don't think this world needs more advice on how to live well. What it needs is humility, a kind of intelligence of the heart that knows we can be wrong. That reason is just the tail wagging behind the intuitive dog. Try to pause for a beat before judging someone. Ask yourself, if I were born into their circumstances, would I really be different? Perhaps that is the only question powerful enough to soften the moral walls we've built around ourselves.